In this episode, Terry interviews Kyle Thompson on what it really means to be a godly man. Kyle gives you the playbook on how to find your cornermen, how to level up your manliness with the Bible, and the type of intensity it truly takes to change into the man God wants you to be.
Hearts on the line, we're lighting the spark, find what's inside, let your purpose ignite, man up, stand up in the dead of the night.
Hey guys, welcome to the Man Up Podcast, where we call men to step up, stand firm, and live the life God designed for them to live. Today's guest is a man who's not afraid to confront culture head on and challenge men to stand up. Kyle Thompson is the founder of the Undaunted Life, and that's a ministry dedicated really to equipping men to push back darkness by forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. This is going to be a fun one today. His podcast, Undaunted Life, is one of the Christian men's top podcasts literally in the world. So he's always tackling hard conversations around masculinity, faith, culture, and truth. He also co-hosts the Daily Blade podcast with our friend Joby Martin, who's been on recently. And more importantly, though, he's a husband to Kelsey and a father to his sons Elijah and James. And so, Kyle, welcome to the Man Up Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
Well, I'm excited. So if you don't mind, we'll just get in and go for it.
Let's go.
So before the Undaunted Life ever existed, who was Kyle? Like, who was this young guy and what shaped you?
Yeah, so Undaunted Life really came from a long line of just trying to figure it out, right? So I've said this story a lot, but I know we're going to have new people that are not familiar with me in your audience. So at 15 years of age, depending on your theological persuasion, I either accepted Christ or the Holy Spirit held me down and forced me to take it. And so here I am, I'm 15, and I'm trying to figure out what it means to be a man because I'm 15. And I'm also now simultaneously trying to figure out what it means to be a Christian man. And in my infinite teenage wisdom, I just came to the conclusion that those are just separate things, right? So there's godly men that do God stuff, right? So they go to church, they talk softly. Every time they talk to you, they're touching you for whatever reason. They've got their shirts tucked into their khakis, and it's just, those are what the God people are doing, reading their Bible and singing stupid songs and whatever. And then there's the manly men outside doing man stuff, killing animals, working out, going to war, eating animals, fighting, that kind of stuff. And I just figured those worlds just don't really connect. But then I get into my 20s and, I discover John Eldridge and Wild at Heart. I start reading the Gospels a little bit more for myself. And I'm like, man, this Jesus dude, this Middle Eastern Jewish construction worker guy seemed pretty rough. He wasn't the guy that I saw depicted in these frescoes and on television as this soft-featured Danish-looking guy somehow, even though he's a Middle Eastern Jew, blonde hair, blue eyes, and just going around kissing everyone on the tips of their noses, saying how cute they looked in their tunics or whatever. And I was like, that doesn't really comport with what I see in the Gospels. And so I got a burden, Terry, for tough guys. Because I was afraid that if you're a tough guy, if you're a manly man, that you're going to walk into church, you're going to see all these doughy, frumpy, overweight dudes and be like, and then, the music is sung in a key that you can't hit, and the lyrical content is more about how God's into you and not how awesome God is. And the pastor is this doughy, frumpy guy that you would never follow into anywhere, much less into battle. And you can't really take him seriously. All the volunteer opportunities are for women and children. The entire church experience is with women and children in mind. And we just accept the fact that apparently men are just supposed to be okay with that, even though the blinking neon sign in the parking lot might as well say, men, we don't have you in mind. And so none of the volunteer opportunities are for men. And these tough guys walk in, they're like, man, I want to serve. I want to do something. And if the only service I can do is to show up at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday morning to do a prayer circle with a bunch of strangers, and talk about my feelings, then I'm out. I'll just go do something else. And so that led to me helping start some men's ministries and doing some different things. And then eventually it's just something I needed to do on my own. I needed to be able to run as fast as possible. I'm a very quick processor, quick talker, and I want to be able to move fast. And I was part of some 501c3s that, every time they wanted to change the font on the website, they had to do a committee meeting and take a vote. And I'm like, you guys, I don't know what y'all are doing, but it's time to run. And, put out a devotional that did well, started the podcast, and, here we are. I don't know, this is the 9th year of the podcast, 10th year of the ministry, and we have the number one podcast in the world directed at Christian men, and we have the number one devotional podcast in the world directed at Christian men, and it's all just, God putting his hand over what we're doing and anointing the work that we do with Undaunted Life so that we can equip men to push back darkness.
It's so good and so spot on, and I think for too many guys listening today, you've met church, but you've not really met Jesus. And when you get that really revelation of who Jesus is, it changes the dynamic, and you look in the mirror and you see that you are the church. Man, that becomes a game changer, and also becomes very welcoming. I know you talk a lot about, and we do too, about seeing the gap between godly men and manly men. You want to unpack that anymore? Like where did that belief come from? Was it based on what you just told us, really what you experienced early on?
Well, to say something like I believe that would imply that it may not be true. I think it's clearly true that there's a gap between what a godly man is and a masculine man is. And it could be extrapolated out. We can spend the rest of our time talking about this, but I think there was a fundamental shift that happened starting in the Industrial Revolution and carried on into the World Wars, into where the masculine, testosterone-filled, virile men, they were working 16-hour shifts in some factory or underground. And then, a lot of those strong, virile men were sent off to war. And this was at a time where you were in a theater of war for years at a time until the conflict was over, not for 6 months or for 9 months like a lot of modern day deployments. And so you had these men that were not in the churches. Why? Because they were working or they were fighting. And so the only people left in the churches were the elderly, the children, and the women, right? And obviously, if you're a pastor, you kind of ping a little bit more. Some of them ping a little bit more to the feminine. They're more emotive. And so, of course, your sermon content is going to be more about grace than it is truth, because the women in your audience want to hear about grace. Of course, you're going to talk more about the Lamb of God and not the Lion of Judah, because the Lamb of God is cute and cuddly and you can snuggle up to him. Lion of Judah is terrifying. Lion of Judah comes back in Revelation to get his church, and he's got a tattoo on his leg, a sword in his mouth. His robe is covered in blood. Is it the blood from the cross? Is it the blood of his enemies? We don't know. His eyes are like fire and everything's terrifying. Yeah, okay, well, that's going to be scary to the women and the children and all the old folks that are just trying to make it to glory as safely and quietly as possible. And so ultimately what you get is you have a culture that rejects masculinity outright. They say masculinity is toxic. If you somehow hold the door open for a lady, you are othering her and saying that she is not able to do that for herself. We're living in the milieu of first, second, third, and now fourth wave feminism, which has just absolutely wrecked this country in a million different ways that we could elucidate for the next 10 hours. But at the same time, I think the culture says masculinity is inherently bad, which is a lie from the pits of hell. And the church says that if you're a masculine man, you need to chill out a little bit, which is also from the pits of hell.
You sound very passionate about that. There's so much ground to make up there, and yes, this could be a 6-hour podcast. I know your mission's super clear. Like, I'm equipping men to push back darkness. Define that for us. Like, for the guys listening to you for the first time today.
Yeah, so ultimately what a lot of pastors do, and again, part of what I do, and I've said this before, if pastors did their job and the other quote-unquote men's ministers out there did their job, I wouldn't have to do my job, right? But the reason why I'm having to do it is so many pastors hide, right? So if you're like a lot of these megachurch guys, you basically figure out what life lesson you want to teach next. You figure out your 4 to 6 week series, and then you back into some scripture that you're going to sprinkle over the top of your your sermon so that you can keep your tax exempt status as a church. And so it's all life lesson stuff. It's all TED Talky stuff, right? And so they're not getting into the real things of culture. But then when pastors do decide to dip their toe into culture, it's always something that agrees with what people on the left agree with. Isn't that so interesting? So they were, a lot of pastors were quick to run to Instagram to post the black square after George Floyd overdosed and died while in police custody in Minnesota back in 2020. But they didn't have a thing to say about Charlie Kirk being martyred in front of the entire world. They didn't have anything to say about the church in Minnesota being stormed by people that were, wanting to disrupt and intimidate Christians while they were worshiping God. And so they didn't have time to say anything about that, but they certainly wanted to pipe up because of what they thought happened, at a particular incident in Minnesota. And so ultimately what I'm having to do is I'm having to bridge the gap for the shepherds that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Because if we are to push back darkness as Christians, and as Psalm 97:10 says, you who love the Lord hate evil. So no, Christians are not called to be nice at all times and to be nice and all those things. We're called to hate. We are called to hate evil. What does God hate? He hates murder. He hates pedophilia. He hates abortion. He hates the transing of the children. He hates gender confusion. He hates feminism. He hates all of these things. And yet pastors are not equipping their flocks to be able to withstand the darkness that is coming from our culture, much less be able to fight back. And so my job and what we've done with Undaunted Life is we're going to cover topics that a lot of pastors won't cover. We're going to cover topics that a lot of men's ministries don't want to cover because they just want to get guys out in the woods and, eat meat and hang out and watch John Eldridge videos, and all that stuff's fine. But it's like when you go back home on Sunday evening, are you equipped to push back darkness now? Darkness in your marriage, darkness with your kids, darkness in your household, darkness in your congregation, darkness in your community, darkness at your place of business. Are you equipped to do that? Because guess what? If you won't even reckon with the darkness and acknowledge that it's there because you've got your eyes covered and your ears plugged, then I'm sorry, you're not equipped to push back that darkness. And then you've got men that can see the darkness, they can recognize it, but they're too cowardly to respond to it. Or they don't feel like they can verbalize anything because they haven't thought through the arguments. And look, this is what I do for a living. So if you're driving a truck or you're working, in construction, or you're doing some job in a cubicle somewhere, you don't have all day to deal with these things and reckon with these philosophies and worldviews. I understand that. So I'm trying to equip you because I might have your attention for 30 minutes to an hour and a half, depending upon, what we're doing. Or, we've got some 2.5, 3 hour long interviews as well. But at the same time, I'm trying to equip you in the time that I have with you to be able to push back darkness in all kinds of different areas. And so that's what we seek to do.
Well, there's definitely a place for it, that's for sure. And I believe it's inspiring people to kind of find their place on the wall. I know you said a lot about the cultural collapse can be traced back to bad men or absent men. That's pretty strong. So walk us through that.
Well, I can do it by elucidating a single. We don't even have to talk about spirituality, Terry. We could just say one sociological data point. If I could just flip it from one side to the other, just about every societal ill, short of the depravity that is only solved by the gospel of Jesus Christ, every societal ill could basically be fixed. Fatherlessness. Okay? So if men would father children and not just sire them, right? So let's look to since the 1960s. Every single racial cohort, except for Asians, fatherlessness has exploded. For whites, it went from 3% to 30%. For Mexicans, it went, or Latino people went from 10% to 50%. For black people, went from 35% to 70%, right? And we've seen massive issues within culture because men don't have fathers. Because every single sociological study, including the atheistic liberal ones, which is most of them, say that if the dad is just in the home, that doesn't mean he's a good provider, a good protector, a Christian, whatever. He could even be abusive. And just the fact that he's in the home, all the data points point to everything working out better for the family and for the children. Out of wedlock births plummet, grades go through the roof, problems with kids getting in trouble and going to juvenile detention or abusing drugs or all those types of things, they hit the basement, right? Why? Because God ordered it this way. Right? He created man first. He created woman from man to be a helpmate made fit for him. The man has the role of headship where he has to basically be like, God, you tell me what I need to do. The woman helps him in that process. They pass that down to their children, who are to love and honor the parents, and the parents are to raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And if we did that, would we have gang problems in this country? Would we have the problem of teenagers abusing drugs and having sex with a bunch of random people just so that they could feel something to fill this empty spot or this empty gap? Would we have this problem where so many different people are dependent on the government for provision, right? And the government's basically you could just be on this government assistance forever. All of those things basically disappear in an instant, right? And so it's men abdicating their responsibility to be heads of household. And again, if you look back, I forget which institute did this study. In this country, if you graduate from high school, wait to have kids until you're married, and get a job, the odds of you being poor are basically non-existent, right? And again, poor in America is very relative to poor in terms of the rest of the world. But again, it all comes down to personal decision-making and behavior. And for most men, their personal decision-making and their behavior doesn't lead to flourishing. It leads to the holding down of image bearers of God.
Yeah. Yeah. Somewhere along the way, we've not listened to Romans 12:2. We've not allowed the word to transform how we're thinking. We let culture conform our mindset, and it's stood over the authority of God's word. And we've got a lot of ground to make up. What Talk to us about the difference between toxic masculinity and biblical masculinity.
So toxic masculinity, the way the culture defines it, is not a thing, okay? So like they said, if a man is chivalrous or if a man is polite to a woman or tries to help out a woman in any way, shape, or form, that's toxic. But toxic masculinity is basically any masculinity that isn't tied to God. So a lot of men think that the number of pull-ups they can do, the number of women they can sleep with, the number of beers that they can drink, that those things are equally tied to the amount of masculinity that they have, which just isn't the case. Because a man, as I define it, is a male that cultivates spiritual, mental, and physical resilience on a daily basis. Okay? Well, in that, there's not a bunch of room for taking advantage of low discernment women. There's not a bunch of room for abusing alcohol to fill some sort of gap in your soul. There's not a lot of room in there for getting in random fights with random people, not about real stuff, not because you're trying to protect yourself or someone else, but because someone scuffed your boots when they accidentally stepped on them at the bar. And so I think that's the gap that most people have. And again, churches have not done a huge favor to us, because if you were to ask most churches, or most pastors rather, so let's just randomly walk up to a senior pastor and say, what is biblical manhood? I think the answer is going to start with this. That's going to be the answer you get from most of these guys. Why? Because they haven't really spent a whole lot of time reckoning with it themselves. Because as a pastor, again, going back to what I said earlier, they're not even focused on the men, right? Now, they will do nothing for 364 days of the year to equip men to disciple their families and to catechize their children and all the things. But then guess what? Every Father's Day, what happens? They want to get in the man's face a little bit, right? They want to rough him up a little bit. Men, why aren't you stepping up? And why is it only women that are volunteering for our opportunities to hold babies in the nursery? Why, they want to hit the men. So the men leave feeling like, man, I guess I'm just here to get abused. Whereas the women float out of church on Mother's Day because it's like they're not even sinners, because women are just the best and they're just saints because they can give birth or something, right? And so I think that it kind of, all these things are tied in together, where if you don't focus on the men, you're not going to get them. You'll get some guys accidentally, but ultimately you're not going to get them. And if you don't get them, if you don't grab their attention, you're not going to be able to equip them to do anything that they need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So we look at this now, and we have a generation of boys, and many of them have been taught, or they've been taught the strength is something to apologize for. What's your comment on that?
I don't really... It's almost not even worth commenting on. My boys, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old son. They're going to be the strongest, most masculine, toxic, resilient men that I can make them to be, right? And why would somebody want you to apologize for strength? Because it's the same thing, like downstream. The only reason feminism even exists in this country is because we got a bunch of dogs and killers that are standing at the gates waiting to push back darkness at a moment's notice. We call it the United States military, right? Because in places where they don't know if there's going to be another rival group from another village coming over to, take our women and children and chop the heads off of all the military-age men, you know what they're not talking about? Gender roles. You know what they're not talking about? Toxic masculinity. They're not talking about any of these things. They're not bringing up ideas of socialism. Some of these people are having to pray the prayer, give me this day my daily bread, right? And so, again, this idea that I would apologize for the strength that God has given me or the strength that I've been able to attain via the things that God has given me is foolish. I don't know why anyone would even consider it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we miss the point that the strength is not, for our benefit, but it's to protect those that we're responsible for. And I think when you start having a revelation of that, you start connecting all the dots, and this stuff's just silly.
Yeah.
We talk a lot on this podcast. We call it corner men, the importance of having corner men in your life. You refer to them, I think it's Foxhole brothers. Tell the guys today, why do men desperately need a corner man or a Foxhole brother?
Well, guys have a lot of buddies. We had a clip go viral from an interview I did with Mike Glover years ago, where I was like, a bunch of dudes have 6 p.m. friends. So if you need help moving a couch or building a fence, or if you have a question about taxes or something random like that, you got a bunch of dudes, they're fellas, right? You got a bunch of fellas in your life that you can call until about 6 o'clock in the evening, right? But how many of you have 3 a.m. friends?
Yeah.
Where it's 3 o'clock in the morning, your world's falling apart for one reason or another, and you've got guys that that when you call, they're going to answer. right? And the way I explained it then is they answer the phone. You can hear them getting their pants and their boots on. You can hear them clicking their pistol in the appendix position, and you can feel, you can hear them, rifling through the shed because they're grabbing a shovel, assuming that there's a body that needs to be buried, right? Like, again, that's I'm being somewhat exaggerative to make my point. But how many of you guys have guys like that? I mean, if you look at the Gospels with the 4 mat toters that took the paralytic, they destroyed a man's house. Right? They destroyed someone else's real estate to drop this guy through the roof to Jesus's feet. Do you have guys in your life that are willing to pick up a corner of your mat to tote you to the feet of Jesus? Do you have guys like that? Because again, we got fellas. We got guys that, I went through police academy with this guy, or this guy and I were in basic training, and every year we get together in October and we go for a golf trip and we go fishing and we go all that. Sorry, those guys are not consequential to your life. Doesn't mean you don't like them. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't slightly inconvenience yourself if they needed help. But you need guys in your community that can respond now. Because if you are having a dark night of a soul and you're trying to figure out how to make it another hour, and your buddy lives halfway across the country or halfway across the world, well, guess what? He's just not your Foxhole brother. Again, it doesn't mean you don't love him. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't hop on a plane to be at, his beck and call or to assist him in some sort of a dark night of the soul. But you need men locally that you are training with, doing hard things with, forging deeper relationships with, so that when you are in the dark night of the soul, because everybody misunderstands Psalm 23. The point is not that God delivers you from the valley. It's that you're either in the valley, coming out of the valley, or about to go into the valley. But when you're at the darkest part of the valley, in that moment, if you have not made deposits into your relationship bank with a bunch of other dudes, a bunch of other killers with a killer mindset, you're not going to have anything to withdraw.
Yeah. And what happens when a guy tries to fight alone? Because, this is such a strategy of the enemy, which I think is why it is so difficult for guys. It doesn't feel natural, because there is definitely a supernatural opposition to letting somebody peek kind of behind the curtains, like, hey, dude, this is just, I don't have all this together, and I need to be able to talk about this. And so I don't think it's natural for most guys to do that. And it's obvious, I think, why the enemy fights that so much. But can you talk just a minute about what happens when a dude just tries to fight alone and do it on his own? Because that's the danger.
Well, just guys, have any of y'all watched Animal Planet? Have any of y'all watched Nat Geo? What happens to the lone wolf? They die alone, right? So even if they used to be the alpha, they are either killed by the new alpha and some of the other wolves that are in the pack, or at the very least, they are pushed out of the pack and they either freeze to death, starve to death, or some other predator takes them out. Is that your aspirational identity? You got the howling wolf, poster on your wall of your gym. You're the lone wolf. You're that guy. Okay, it goes well for a little bit, doesn't end well, right? I want a story that goes well and ends well, right? And so this idea that you can just go it alone, like that's this Western American machismo thing, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Now, I think that we should embrace some forms of stoicism. I think we should embrace toughness. I think a lot of guys, they love to complain, and then they're like, well, hey, I'm just sharing my feelings. I thought I was supposed to do that. It's like, no, you're whining. You're whining. Like, you're whining about circumstances that you can change and fix. And I would actually disagree that guys don't do this naturally. We do it all the time at work. So whether you're a bank teller or you're an assistant to a guy working on HVAC or you're in the military, when you don't know how to do something, what do? You ask your boss. You ask your manager. You ask the person that trained you to do the thing, but you weren't paying attention in training because you were setting your next fantasy football draft schedule or whatever. You go and ask them, hey, how do you do that again? Hey, how do I do that transaction? Hey, how do I, work on this joint? Like, hey, how do I mold that? That's what you do. But then all of a sudden you get to your personal life and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, no, just do the thing that you always do in other contexts and bring it into this one.
Well, why do you think guys resist that so much, just that accountability? What do you think the pushback mentally is for a lot of guys?
Well, because if you ask somebody to hold you accountable, they might do it, right? And as a man, I don't need anyone telling me what to do. You don't know me. You don't know my circumstances. You don't know what's going on in my head. You don't know what my dad did or said to me when I was a kid, all that kind of stuff. It's like, well, if you tell me, I'll know. I'll never know what it is like to experience that because I am me and you are you. But at the same time, you'll see guys, this especially happens in Christian men's circles, right? So you go to this, men's meeting, or you go to this men's camp, or you go to this men's event or whatever, and, you get excited for a few hours and you're like, I'm going to have accountability partners. And you call or text some of your buddies, or you sit down with them there at the event and you say, I want you guys to hold me accountable. Here's where I'm struggling. If the devil were trying to take me out, here's how he would try to do it. And then the first time one of those guys tries to hold your feet to the fire, even in a loving way, you reject that person. You stiff-arm that person. And then guess what? They're not going to try again because you proved that you are too emotionally fragile to actually have accountability. Because I got a bunch of dudes in my life that are willing to put their finger in my chest, right? They're willing to grab me by the scruff of my shirt and say, hey, brother, you're going to stop doing that. I saw you do that. And look, I'm in kind of this sphere, and people think like, oh, because I've got this weird job that they can't correct me, that they can't interrupt me. My Foxhole guys interrupt me, right? If I'm about to fly off and defend something that's based in my ego, they're like, oh, shut up, Thompson. I wasn't quite done. And then they're going to give it to me, and then I got a decision to make. I'm either full of crap and I don't mean the things that I say, and I didn't actually mean it when I deputized them to do exactly what they're doing in that moment, or I do mean it, and I'm going to accept it. I'm going to chew on it, and I'm going to think it through. I mean, it even happened last night. Had a rough jiu-jitsu practice. I'm kind of wearing it all over my face right now. Was having trouble getting a move, and my kids were there, and they weren't exactly, behaving in the exact way that I wanted, but I kind of had an ego attack, and I took it out on a couple of my teammates, and I took it out on my sons. Well, guess what I did this morning upon further reflection? I messaged some of my teammates, some of which are Christians, some of which are not, and I said, that's not within my normal character. That was a flare-up of ego, and I let some of my emotions kind of get to me, and I didn't handle myself how you've seen me handle myself, some of these men, for years and years and years. It was like, man, what's going on with Thompson, right? And look, I realized it halfway through driving to my boys' home, right? I pull the truck over and I stick my head into the back of the truck, and I apologize to each one of them individually for, getting so mad and frustrated at them that I took it out on them and made them cry. Again, they're 5 and 3. They don't know what they're doing. They can barely trust a fart at this age. And here I was like getting after them about something that wasn't even that big of a deal. And so that I was able to do that individually, Terry, because of the number of guys that have called me out in a dyadic way, right?
Yeah.
Because they pointed something out. Hey, Kyle, when some of these things happen, you know how you react. You kind of sound like a jerk. You kind of act like a jerk. You should probably not do that. Then I start making adjustments, right? And then you're able to do it better by yourself, but you still need the guys to help you through the process.
Yeah, so true. So guys listen today and they realize, like, man, I don't have those. I got a lot of buddies, so I know these fellas, but I don't have corner men. I don't have anybody in my Foxhole. How to give the guys advice on how to find the right corner man?
Men default to connecting shoulder to shoulder before they connect eyeball to eyeball. Women default to connecting eyeball to eyeball. They don't even need shoulder to shoulder, right? Think about it in the hunter-gatherer days. So you and 6 other hunters from the tribe or whatever, you're trying to take down the bison or whatever. The men are stoic. They're quiet. They've got their plan. They're shoulder to shoulder. And when they get the animal on the ground, then after they've accomplished something difficult, they've earned the right to be eyeball to eyeball with one another. And then the razzing is going to start like, oh, did you see Jim? He tripped on that rock. He did the same thing last week. What a dork. And and then you're razzing each other, but you're doing it because you earned the circle, right? And so most men need to seek out other men that are doing hard stuff, right? You're going to find Foxhole brothers at jiu-jitsu gyms, at CrossFit boxes. You're going to find Foxhole brothers at things like Toastmasters, where you're getting up and speaking in front of a group of strangers and then they give you like real-time feedback. That can be really, really hard, especially if you don't like speaking in public and you don't like taking critical feedback. Find those areas where guys are doing hard stuff and then extrapolate out from there. And as I tell people all the time, because I'm like, guys, Kyle, I want to build a Foxhole like you have, every Sunday night, from 7 to 9 p.m., which is the least convenient time possible. But every Sunday night, you got a group of guys that gets together. You're all reading the same book, and you get together and discuss it. And then you do a workout, and then you do jiu-jitsu. Some guys have been doing jiu-jitsu for well over a decade. Some guys, this is their second time ever being on a mat with their shoes off. And then we just get together and we hammer things out for 2 hours. And those are the guys that you can rely on, because if you're the guy that quits during the workout every time, that tells me something about you. If you're the guy that taps out and then freaks out, right? You have this ego check, that tells me something about you. You're not a man that's in control, and you want to have men that are in control, that are in your corner. But I just tell these guys, set up the environment and just invite guys. That's all you can do. It's kind of like, it's a derivative of, the Field of Dreams thing. That thing was, if you build it, he will come. This is, if you build it, they might come. You don't know. Try to remove the barriers to entry to your group, right? So if you want to set up a rucking club or something like that, well, really good rucks, like from Go Ruck, they can be expensive. That's a $300 backpack, and then you got to put weight in and all that. A lot of guys, really can't afford that. So if you've got some people of means, or you're a man of means, buy 2 or 3 extra ones. So if a guy's like, I would come to your rucking club, but I don't have a ruck, no big deal. I've got a few extra in the back of the truck. If you're going to set up a jiu-jitsu gathering or something like that, make sure it's no gi instead of gi. Most guys don't know how to spell gi. They don't know what a gi is. They don't know how to be fitted for one, and you're not going to spend $100, $200 on a gi if you never know if you're going to do jiu-jitsu again. So make it no gi. Just show up in workout clothes. Hey, make sure you wear sandals or slides, and grab your bottle of water, and come expectant to have some conversations, to work out hard, and then we'll do it again, rinse and repeat next week. Try to remove the barriers to entry, invite men into a shoulder-to-shoulder environment, and then work forward to where you earn eyeball to eyeball.
I love this phrase, hard times make strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. Where do you think we're at in that cycle right now?
I mean, we're clearly in the last part, because we have these effeminate men that are also narcissistic, that are drawn to things where they have power, right? Think of what COVID showed us about a lot of people. You had people that were maybe the hall monitor kid in school, or maybe they weren't really well liked, and all of a sudden they're a manager at, Arby's, and they can scream at you and because you don't have your mask up in between bites of your sandwich or whatever, right? And so you have a lot of people that they're not actually strong. They've just been given strength by something that's outside of them. They haven't really accomplished anything difficult. They've been handed something. Maybe you have somebody that has immutable characteristics that are different than yours, but they hit a lot of the intersectional boxes. And so we've created this culture where victimhood is praised and virtue is seen as something negative. I mean, just look at the systems of government like socialism or which is downstream from Marxism, communism. Communism is just socialism with balls and guns. But essentially, it's like, wait, you have stuff, I don't have stuff. Give me your stuff. I mean, you earned that. Or someone in your line earned that and then gave it to you, and that's an inequity somehow. So give it to me now. Well, it's like, look, dude, if you're not willing to work, then you're not going to have what I have. And some people do get born and they wake up on third base. Okay, well, we live in the best time in human history, in the best country in human history, to change our current standing. Everyone talks about the 1%. Do you know people come into and out of the 1% their entire careers? Now, the Jeff Bezoses and the Elon Musk, they're basically going to be there. But then all these other people, you have mobility within your life. You can go from making $30,000 a year to making $300,000 a year based on your the way you work, the way you create, doors that God's going to open for you. And so, without getting too far out into a big political rant, I think a lot of people have just accepted this time period where you have all these weak men, these effeminate men or literal women that are on the levers of government, that are basically trying to do what they can to level out the playing field. But what they're actually trying to do is they're trying to make everyone equally poor and destitute so that the elites that they themselves are a part of can have all the levers of control to themselves.
Yeah, that is so true and spot on. I believe every word of that. So, the daily habits that separate the strong men from the weak men. Tell us quickly what some of those are.
I would say for most guys, they wake up every day with comfort in mind. What can I do to be comfortable? What can I do that's convenient? And so one of the first things that I do every morning is I have a garage gym. So I wake up and I go to my garage gym and I torture myself. Okay? People are like, Kyle, you exercise all the time. You've exercised since you were a teenager. You must love it. It's like, no, I hate it. If I could take a magic pill, which doesn't exist, but I can take a magic pill and have all the benefits of all the lifting and cardio and fighting and all the stuff that I do, I would just do that. I would just save the time. It sucks. It's really, really, really hard But there's this concept, Terry, that I've tried to, help people wrap their minds around. It's, I've seen me do that before. I've seen me do that before. So let's say you get your gym bag, you go, and you get to the gym, but you didn't sleep well last night. Your boss came down on you for missing another deadline. You and your wife are not doing well. Your kids are acting up or whatever. And you go to the gym and you walk in there, you start to warm up and you're like, I'm just out. I need to take care of my body. I need to listen to my body today. I need a mental health day or something like that. And you grab your crap and leave. Well, you've seen you do that before. You've seen you do that before. And it'll be very, very easy to continue doing that because you've seen you do that before. But let's take the same scenario. Tired, hungry, bad wife, bad kids, bad boss, bad situation, bad circumstances. And you get your butt in that gym and you don't want to work out for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever, and you do it. You're resilient and you do it. You've seen you do that before. The same thing. You didn't want to talk to your wife because this is a hard subject matter. She's probably going to get mad at you and then she won't have sex with you today or this week or whatever the situation is, but it's best for your relationship and best for your household to have this discussion. So you don't avoid the discussion. You go into it with a loving servant's heart. You've seen you do that before. With your children, right? You got in this habit of every time you say their name out loud, they freeze because they think, oh shoot, dad's mad again or something like that. You've seen you do that before. But can you control your tongue? Can you calm yourself? Can you deliver punishment through a calm voice and a calm heart rate and all of that and get a more positive outcome? Well, if you keep doing that, you've seen you do that before. And so for a lot of men, you want everything to be easy, but choose hard, right? Because guess what? Like, especially when you're talking physically, it's good. You get to choose your hard. So if you're fat and lazy and don't exercise and you eat junk food, your body's going to break down. You're going to get sick. That's going to be hard. Or if you work out hard, you forego the pleasure of the donut and you said eat the steak or something like that, and you do all those things, that's hard too, but it's going to lead to better outcomes. And it's more honoring to God because you're honoring the meat chassis that he gave you, right? And you only get one of them, right? You don't get any redos. And so that's the thing that I would just say for most guys is it's okay to be comfortable. It's okay to kick your feet up every now and then, but you should look for opportunities to cultivate resilience.
Men are made for hard things, so just go be a man. So if a guy wants to build some spiritual strength tomorrow morning, what's step one for him? What would be your advice?
For most guys is they don't consume the Bible at all, and yet they expect to get more deep understandings of what's in it. So just imagine if you're working on an engine for a 68 Chevelle, and there's a manual there that tells you what everything does, how it all goes together, what parts that you need to check if this goes wrong, and blah, 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 and all that. And you have no experience working on engines, no experience working on muscle cars, and you don't open the book that tells you how to do it. You think you're just going to figure it out? You're just going to start grabbing wrenches and pliers, and you're just going to start making things work, right? I basically just described me. I don't know how to work on an old engine, old transmission, right? So how stupid would that be? And yet, you have this Bible. You've got a Bible because you're an American. Now, normally you have to take it off the shelf and blow the dust off because it's just been basically sitting there. You've got this and then you don't study it, and yet you expect to have the wisdom that comes from studying this. And part of it is because of the word I just used, study. Most men think if I don't have time to study the Bible, then I'm not going to consume it. Sorry, that's just not an excuse. That's why Joby and I created the Daily Blade. It's a podcast. It's 5 minutes a day with the blue collar worker, the fighter, the warrior, the LEO, with that guy in mind. He doesn't have time to listen to John Piper, explain a Greek phrase over, 2 hours. They got 5 minutes. We're going to give them a little bit of Bible. We're going to give them some application, and hopefully that leads to a thirst and a hunger for more of what God can reveal and show to them in his word. Because this is not a guide to how you can get God to be your own personal cosmic genie, right? The Bible is for us, but for the most part, it's not about us. And so if you want to hear God speak to you, you need to read his word. And if you want to hear him speak to you audibly, read it out loud, right? And yet guys don't want to spend any time inside of it, and it's always tomorrow. It's always, I'll start tomorrow. Or, I got a tough quarter, beginning of Q2, I'm going to hit it. Or, oh man, it's December, we got a lot of Christmas parties, the kids are busy with activities, but January 1, new year, new me, baby, I'm going to do it. It's like, I'm sorry, if you keep saying tomorrow, I'm going to start tomorrow, you're never going to start. And even if you do start, you're going to quit. So why even try?
Good advice. The dads listening out there today, what do you see talking to guys out there is the biggest mistake you think fathers are making today? If you had to pick one of them.
I mean, gosh, there's a myriad of mistakes that dads make, and I've even thrown myself on my own sword.
Yeah.
I think it's emotional regulation, more than likely. I would say a lot of men have an anger issue that they just embrace. And so here's the thing. We get to choose our behavior. We get to choose our reactions, right? Now, if you're walking on a trail and you're about to step on a rattlesnake and your body tells you, jump back, you didn't choose that. Your body just saved your butt because God put that somewhere in the wiring of your brain, to save you from having your leg amputated. But for the most part, we get some stimuli, some input on the front end, and then we get to choose our reaction. Okay? You get to choose whether you get mad, whether you yell, whether you cuss, whether you break something, whether you castigate, whether you start arguing, all those different things. But isn't it so interesting? You can have the same input on one end, the same stimuli, but if you change your behavior, the outcome is different. But most men are just like, that's how I'm wired. My dad was the same way, right? And hey, I don't kick the dog nearly as much as my dad did, so whatever. I mean, I got men in my life that just think, I call it country music theology. I believe in God. I like the American flag. If I listen to music, it's 90s country music, and God's pro all that stuff, so I get to go to heaven. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not how any of this works, right? If you don't pishtuo, if you don't put your trust and your faith in your salvation in the finished work of Jesus on the cross and accept the grace through faith as a free gift, sorry, you don't get to blue collar your way into getting God to just allow you into his presence. And so, yeah, for most guys, there are guys that are lazy. There are guys that, seek comfort. There are guys that are addicted to porn and addicted to substances and all that stuff's bad. But it all comes down to decision-making and emotional regulation. So I'm not pulled to the chemical, but I could be, right? I'm Irish and Choctaw Indian, so alcohol could be a major problem for me, so I just keep it in check. But for me, it's more sexual temptation. That's the temptation that if I were Satan, that's how he would try to take me out, because I know my life and he has all my game film. And so the thing is you figure out how God is going to try to assist you and guide you and how Satan's going to try to knock you off the tracks, and then you make decisions and regulate your emotions in those areas. That's how you win. That's how you get victory.
Golly, whole podcast was worth that right there, guys. I mean, that's a game changer if you will act on that bit of wisdom. And, experience, guys, experience is what we're learning from our own mistakes. Wisdom is learning from the mistakes of others, and that was some gold right there. So, well, listen, I know you don't have all day to talk to us. I appreciate your time today. This has been some solid advice. I appreciate you being on the show, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation. And guys, if you want to figure out more and get more of our resources, our website is Undaunted.life. The main show is Undaunted Life, a man's podcast. And then we also have the Daily Blade. I have a coaching program called Dominion. So if you go to our website, Undaunted.life/Dominion, that's a coaching program that we open it up to teams every 6 months. And so you can join the wait list if that's something that you want to be serious about. We're looking for committed dudes that want to be able to be equipped to push back darkness. And that's what the program does. So a lot of resources so that we can put our time and our effort where our focus is.
Guys, I encourage you to go check that out. Fill your life, fill your mind with things that are going to build you up, not tear you down. Guys, listen to this really clearly. You weren't created to coast. You were not created to fight alone. Find your corner man, sharpen your edge, train your spirit, go home and lead at your house. Push back some darkness. Kyle, thanks for bringing strength and clarity to everything we're talking about today.
Thank you so much.
Guys, remember, legacy is not what you leave to someone, it's what you leave in them. And we'll see you next time on a Man Up Podcast.